Nii tere minu poolt ka, mina olen Aivar, töötan Riigikantselei innovatsioonivaldkonna juhina ja olemegi jõudnud sinna, kuhu tegelikult eelmine paneeldiskussioon meid juhtis, et räägime küsimusest kuidas. Alustan aga natukene kaugemalt. Mul oli esimene kogemus. Ma olen pikki aastaid käinud erinevatel konverentsidel välismaal erinevates kontekstides ja esimest korda ma tulin ühelt konverentsilt tagasi tundega, et me oleme onu e-Eesti. Mida ma sellega mõtlen, et me oleme natukene muutunud, see tunnetus, mis tekkis seal, oli see, et jah, meid kutsutakse lavale, vaadatakse, et see on see onu, kes tegi suuri asju, teda on endiselt kuulda mõnus, teda on endiselt kuulda sellest, missugused läbimurdelised asjad tehti, endiselt mõnus. Aga et on nagu vaadata juba uute ja nooremate ja agiilsemate ja nii edasi poole. Ja see on see, mille pärast sellise temaatika tõstatamine, nagu see konverents siin ka teeb, vajalik on. Me tahame vaadata, et me jääksime pikemas perspektiivis selleks innovaatiliseks riigiks, mitte maine pärast, vaid ka sisu pärast. Et me kannaksime edasi tulevikku neid võimalusi, neid võimekusi, seda majandusedu ja nii edasi, mis meid edasi kannaks. Sellepärast ütles Lauri seda, mida ta ütles. Me teeme väga paljude erinevate asutustega Riigikantseleiga koostööd, just digi, ITL ja teised. Ja praegu on tõesti erasektoriga koostöö see ja see kuidas on nüüd see järgmine tähtis küsimus. Meil on mõnes mõttes konsensus ehitatud siin, et erasektoriga peame me tegema uued kokkulepped, uued koostöövormid ja see on väga tähtis. Ja nüüd, kui me teeme nende erinevate organisatsioonidega koostööd, siis üks, kes ei ole veel laval käinud täna ja kellega me siiski koostööd teeme, on just akadeemiline maailm. Me vaatame erinevaid viise, me kaasame neid erinevatesse projektidesse, aga praegusel juhul meil on siis võimalus kuulata kahte tiimi, siis TalTechi Ragnar Nurkse instituudi ühest magistriprogrammis Pioneer, kus vaadati just seda, et kuidas me konkreetsetes valdkondades saame koostööd erasektoriga teha. Ja inglise keeles millegipärast ei ole seda eesti keelde väga hästi nagu üle tulnud, aga just see GovTechi, see riigi teenused, mida saab erasektor pakkuda, et millised need koostöömudelid seal võiksid olla. So I'm going to switch to English because we have international students. Just to introduce them, we have two teams. The first one is about how do we include the private sector in e-exams. We've seen on some newspaper articles about how the state is handling this currently. They have a proposal on how to address this. The second team, which will follow immediately after the first one, we'll talk about bureaucrat, the ecosystem surrounding bureaucrat. So how private companies can provide better services to the government, to their customers, to the citizens, along with the private sector. So let's have a listen. They have the how. Please.
Thank you, Ivar. My name is Rudy. I'm from Ireland, and I'm here today with Luis from Mexico. And we're going to be discussing our proposal for how GovTech partnerships can improve the case of the Estonian e-exam system. I'm now going to allow Luis to provide some information on the case and our research.
Thank you very much, Rudy. Everything started with this vision of having all state exams digital by 2027. This vision or this goal is managed by the Ministry of Education and Research and also by the Education and Youth Board, which manages all the systems and all the platforms related to education in Estonia. What has happened so far? In 2024, this system was run for the first time, but it had some glitches. And because of that, then schools had to implement the plan B, which was to take exams on paper. This generated a little bit of backlash, but fortunately, on 2025, already some exams were able to take place digitally. These exams are mainly language exams, and the plan is to make all exams digital by 2027. Of course, this has some challenges for exams that are more complicated, for example, math or chemistry, in which you need to consider a little bit more when you are considering the procedure or how you evaluate the answers. Now, we identified these 4 challenges. For this, we perform semi-structured interviews with key stakeholders from the public sector, the private sector, and also from nonprofit. And based on the answers, we perform thematic analysis and we identified this. First, we have in-house capacity. The challenge of the lack of in-house capacity is very important because teams from the government need to have this capacity inside in order to have a notion and an understanding of whatever happens outside, whatever is outsourced. Then we have the vendor lock-in situation. It is very important to avoid vendor lock-in, but at the same time, it is a little bit tricky because the government, of course, they have the law obligation to provide the service, and of course, companies have their private interests, so it's very delicate to manage this equilibrium. Then we have the high costs associated to in-house development. Having something outsourced will always be cheaper, but sometimes governments prefer to assume these high costs, but they prefer this rather than having the risk of a failure in the partnership whenever they are outsourcing critical components of the services they deliver. Finally, we have the procurement. We found that sometimes governments lack a clear procurement specifications and a clear first procurement approach towards how they start the partnership with the private sector. So we find that procurement is key to start the partnership in a good way.
Thank you, Luis. So with these key challenges in mind, we have developed a solution guided by the following principles. Our solution aims to ensure digital sovereignty, to leverage modularity in order to overcome vendor lock-in issues, and to facilitate open collaboration and interoperability to maximize the quality of the outcome. Our proposal has 2 stages. First, we propose restructuring the domains of responsibility within the project. And second, we propose a tailored procurement process recommendation, which can be used to secure GovTech partnerships. Through our research, one thing which we learned was that certain elements of the e-exam system should remain under public ownership, specifically the core infrastructure and all related data banks. And this is due to the sensitivity of the data that is being handled. Our solution then is to split the product into 2, separating the user interface components, which can be split into teacher and student-facing portals, away from the core infrastructure. The idea here is to isolate the less sensitive components of the overall system and open them up to GovTech partnerships. In order for this to work, it is important to facilitate and demand modular solutions which can be plugged in and out of the core infrastructure as needed. In pursuing a split product like this, it becomes important to consider that new governance structures would be required. We've created a visual diagram which shows the division of roles and responsibilities between the public and private sector, but while still emphasizing the need for close collaboration on key issues. This restructuring creates a window of opportunity for GovTech to enter the situation. However, it remains important to consider the practical steps that are required to actually secure GovTech partnerships in a way which manages the competition and avoids vendor lock-in. That brings us to the next stage of our proposal, which is procurement.
Thank you very much, Rudy. From these practical steps, how can we link these 2 sides of the framework? Considering the challenges that we identified, we analyzed and we concluded that procurement is the challenge in which where you input the less amount of effort, you get the greater gains or the greater impact. Because procurement is also part of the process in which you have the first contact from the private sector and the government. These are the steps that we are considering for our successful procurement, which is the pre-procurement phase, then the framework agreement, and then the payment scheme. The first one is pretty straightforward. It is related to how governments can make a fair competition for all companies that want to come in the procurement process. How they can come with clear specifications and how they can have clear contracts so that everybody can participate and that the competition is fair for everybody.
So the second stage of our procurement recommendation is to make use of a framework agreement. This is a long-term procurement arrangement which can be extended to multiple suppliers. This sets the terms and conditions for future collaboration, but does not in and of itself guarantee any specific volume of work. This provides benefits to the government as it allows the government to create a network of pre-approved collaborators, and then it also reduces the burden of procuring work from these collaborators in the future. It is also attractive to GovTech firms as it creates an environment of reduced competition relative to an open market. The next stage and final stage of our procurement recommendation is related to the payment scheme. Throughout our research, this came up frequently as one of the more contentious issues. What we found was that governments tended to prefer fixed price contracts due to the budget certainty that they provide. However, this was often a deal breaker for private actors due to the inflexibility and the difficulty of accurately estimating the volume of work that will be involved in large projects. Our solution is to propose a modular contract setup where large projects can be broken down into smaller phases. Typically, this would be discovery, build, and operate phases. In doing so, there is increased budget certainty and increased flexibility regardless of the payment style that is used. One of the main drawbacks of modular contracts is that they increase the transaction costs. However, we believe that with a comprehensive framework agreement in place, the transaction costs can be mitigated. That brings us to the end of our presentation. We hope that the work we have presented here today provides some valuable food for thought on the applications of GovTech partnerships, both in the case of e-exams and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Test. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Orsa, and I'm from Kosovo.
And I'm Summer, and I'm from the United States.
Together with the rest of our team here in the audience, it's our pleasure to present our project on bureaucrat and the opportunities it offers for the GovTech ecosystem in Estonia. Okay. As many of you may know, this is supposed to be a krat. In Estonian folklore, a krat is a creature that is created to serve its creator. In traditional means, the krat is made out of old straws and old tools. But for our krat, we're made it out of algorithms and codes. So, as what Estonia did is that it took a nation myth and turned it into a 21st century public service assistance and named it bureaucrat, which is now a digital helper to help the public service, and also the citizen. Okay. To better understand what bureaucrat is, we should understand its vision. So right now, the agencies work independently. Each has its own processes, its own systems, and there's very little real-time coordination. However, bureaucrat changes that, because now the bureaucrat becomes a network where these agencies all communicate with one another. These communications happens through message rooms, which are safe, secure spaces built on X road, where agents can communicate, exchange data, and trigger certain actions which are needed to deliver a certain service. So, and by then, each agent is still semi-autonomous, which means that it's under it's still under human oversight. However, this vision goes even further because now since the network is open, there's still room for private companies to come in. The private companies can also build and be part of the system with its agents and different components. Because of that, in this case, the private companies don't become just vendors anymore, but they also become part of the network. So together, these agents completely through bureaucrat and the whole system, they communicate and coordinate through the message rooms. And together, they deliver the needed public services that are needed for the citizens and for the public administration.
So this vision here that Dorsa has outlined really is the future of what the agentic state can look like in Estonia. And so what we've spent the last several months working on as a team with Dorsa and our other team members here in the audience is really figuring out what the role of GovTech can be in this kind of digital transformation. Next slide, please. So how we tackled this question. Over the past several months, we've taken this kind of three-pronged approach. The first was taking a look at desk research. So here we were reading government sources, we were looking at these vision papers, really trying to build our background and kind of get this kind of theoretical grounding in our work. And then we moved on to an interview section. So we talked to stakeholders from both the public sector and the private sector. And our goal here was really to hear their real-life experiences working either with bureaucrat or around bureaucrat. And we're really looking to get this kind of boots-on-the-ground, real-life practitioner perspective. And then finally, we merged the findings from these two phases, and we really mapped the concepts and the themes that we're seeing over and over. And we're looking at the opportunities and the challenges that were coming up. So in our mapping, like I said, we found a bunch of themes that were coming up over and over that felt important to spend some more time on. So in terms of digital services, fragmentation is an issue. And luckily, this is decreasingly the case as Estonia is moving forward towards this kind of life event service clustering that we're seeing. So there's good progress being made here. But we were hearing stories about citizens having to actively and manually seek out services, which then puts more of the onus on the citizen rather than the role that the government plays. We're also seeing and hearing some kind of concerns about public lag. So as the kind of tech capability of the private sector is growing, you're getting increasingly high quality private services. But there's kind of an issue here where there's a growing gap or a disparity between these kind of citizen expectations of what services should be looking like and sometimes what the government is actually able to provide. In terms of the actual GovTech space, we were hearing stories and kind of reports of the barriers to entry being pretty high for GovTech firms and other SMEs. So procurement requirements like having a minimum amount of public contracts that you have competed in or have had and held in previous years, that kind of requirement oftentimes will lead to the favoring of an incumbent and kind of push these smaller, newer firms to the sides. And finally, the procurement process can be pretty tough, as I'm sure everyone knows. And oftentimes these procurement processes don't necessarily favor or support these long-term relationships and these like more collaborative relationships, and instead are more focused on short-term procurements or scrap procurements that are more focused around discrete tasks and causes and things like that.
Based on our research and interviews, we've come up with 3 major GovTech opportunities and policy recommendations where Estonia can make progress into its GovTech ecosystem. First, GovTech Opportunity 1 is about building domain-targeted agents, which are small specialized agents to deliver specific services through bureaucrats. So that can be, for example, valid permit validation, or it could be a car accident reporting agent. So, but for this to happen, the government needs to shape the environment. So what the government can actually do in this case is first, it needs to further develop distributed message room infrastructure and provide this message room infrastructure to the private tech companies. Because this layer is really important to provide this space for the agents to communicate with one another. If this space, if this layer is not provided, then the agents will still continue working as isolated tools and cannot be functioning well inside the ecosystem. Second step, what the government should do is to predefine open source and modular interoperability standards, because this would help that the agents that are built, then they can fit in really good. Really good within the ecosystem, so that they can still work smoothly on a technical aspect. The third step is about to demonstrate clearly the potential use cases. So the governments need to specifically know what they need and so that the private companies then can actually provide the solutions. Say you need to synchronize a registry, or you need to validate to do certain license to be automated. Then the GovTech can provide the solution when you actually know the problem. And fourth and most important is about to provide guidance and allocate resources for safe experimenting. This could include providing the environment for sandboxing, for hackathons, and similar challenges, because this would allow the GovTech companies to actually try real-world case scenarios without causing disruption. And it was recently that Estonia passed the regulatory framework on sandboxes. So right now the foundation is already being laid out, and it's a really good opportunity to take it now. GovTech opportunity 2 is about enhancing the technical system. So to develop the specific technical upgrades which will take the bureaucratic ecosystem to its next step. What the government should do in this case is that first, it needs to build cross-sector teams and embrace the private capabilities. When you have this mixed sector teams, you're going to bring in the private sector expertise too, and they can offer their knowledge on specific issues, and then they can deliver also specialized innovation. Second is that the government should recruit GovTech for specialized tech development. So the private companies have certain technical expertise, especially to provide solutions where deep technical expertise is needed, so they can provide solutions for different technical development, and especially, for example, for the language, for training the language models, and for adding specific modules into the bureaucrat. And thirdly, to encourage proactive GovTech contribution. This is also about providing this prototyping sprints or innovation challenge, which would allow the GovTech to come forward with solutions before being called upon. The GovTech Opportunity 3 is about creating a trust and certification framework, because when you have multiple actors creating agents, then you need to have this scheme to provide the trust and so that those agents can work the same, let's say. Because through this scheme, the government can be safe about accountability, they can be safe about security, and most importantly about standardization of these agents. The development of a certification scheme for the GovTech agents is aimed to mainly create this compliance within the security aspect, because when these agents are certified through this scheme, then the government, also the citizens, can trust these certain agents. And secondly, it's important to also establish a GovTech unit in RIA as a central hub, because when the ecosystem becomes more open and more dynamic, it's really important to still be governed by high standards and keep Estonia on its digital lead as it is right now. So it's really important that the security and trust are all maintained through one central hub, which is also right now the coordinating agency through RIA.
So these opportunities obviously do not come without challenges, and there are a number of things to consider. And we found that in general, these considerations apply to the bureaucrat use case specifically, but also to general challenges that the Estonian government is facing. and governments around the world are facing as they're developing anything from a kind of rudimentary information system to more of a complex AI ecosystem. So the first kind of challenge here and consideration that we've been thinking about is procurement. So as discussed a little bit before, one of the issues is that the procurement process oftentimes is optimized for single vendor relationships rather than more of a kind of modular, collaborative environment that bureaucrat really needs to thrive. Another conversation that kept coming up over and over, and one that's important to discuss, is the issue of data privacy, accountability, liability, topics like these. While these conversations are absolutely critical to address and to have, a lot of them, unfortunately, are context dependent and context specific, and that makes the governance of these big topics pretty difficult and kind of necessitates the case-by-case governance here. So these conversations need to be had, but they need to be specific and thoughtful and intentional. And then finally, scaling. Bureaucrat, like many other big digital transformation efforts, is extremely time-sensitive or time-intensive, capacity-intensive, financially intensive. And so it's really important that the agencies who are involved and the government as a whole has a very clear understanding of what its priorities are, so it can make sure that it's spending time and money appropriately in order to scale bureaucrat both effectively but also relatively efficiently. This does not mean that there's like no way forward, and if these opportunities are realized and they're followed and you know the appropriate time and care is spent on bureaucrat, there are a lot of opportunities and like promises for the future. So we see that looking like bureaucrat really serving as Estonian digital public infrastructure and as some of the backbone for e-Estonia. We're seeing citizens receiving active services rather than more passive services as part of this kind of seamless government initiative and transformation. We're also seeing that the private sector has a new opportunity to add value on top of current government efforts, not just working tangentially or aside. There's more of a collaborative effort, and this is an opportunity especially for GovTech. And finally, we're seeing the opportunity for Estonia to really serve as a blueprint for Europe and for maybe even the rest of the world, especially if bureaucrat is scaled beyond the borders of Estonia. So in sum, as we've discussed throughout this presentation, there's a lot of potential here with bureaucrat. If bureaucrat is blooming as we're hoping for, the public sector becomes more responsive to its citizens. The GovTech sector has the opportunity to involve and collaborate with the government in new and innovative ways, and the citizens are happier and have a better experience. So that's it. Thank you very much, and we appreciate being here. Thank you.
So thank you to the students again. They even got to interview ministers, heads of services. They did a great job. And there were a lot of different teams. Unfortunately, we had limited time, so we could only have 2 up on the stage here. What I would like to conclude with is that we really, we still have the international interest, the brand of e-Estonia is very much alive. And I think it's important to always consider what was said by one of our presidents: what got us here is not what is going to take us forward. So you might want to consider, and I forgot to transition into Estonian, sorry, et meil on väga tähtis hoida seda konteksti paigas, et me saaksime aru, mis on see järgmine laine, millega me saame säilitada oma edumaad. Ja praegu tõesti, nagu ka meie digiriigi asekantsler just ütles, see väga paljudes riikides on e-riik alles niimoodi ekraanil ja unelmates. On ka väga palju riike, kus kohas see on vägagi reaalsuseks saanud. Ja nendes riikides aina rohkem tekitab küsimust, missugused ettevõtted, missugused turud on, millised ettevõtted selles GovTech nii-öelda digiteenuste pakkujates üle võtnud. Ja ma usun ja ma näen väga palju asitõendeid selle osas, et järgmine laine saabki olema selline kommertsialiseerumine selles konkreetses valdkonnas. Ja meil tasub olla siin eesotsas. Alati tasub olla seal eesotsas. Ja ma soovitan tõesti sellist teekonda ette võtma, nagu siin väiksed analüüsid, need ei olnud lõplikud tõed, need olid lihtsalt ühed mõttekäigud, mis paari kuu jooksul kokku pandi, aga julgustan samamoodi oma teenuste osas kindlasti avaliku sektori kolleege selle suunas mõtlema, erasektoril kaasa mõtlema ja panema kokku sellise suuna, kus mitte me ei lahenda ainult enda riigi valukohti, vaid pakume võib-olla sellise kavandi, kuidas ja konkreetsed teenusepakkujad, kes seda suudaksid ka rahvusvaheliselt teha. Ja kui juht küsib, et miks me nüüd sellisest aspektist asja vaatame, siis saategi öelda, ma ei taha, et Eesti oleks onu e-Eesti. Et seda ei ole meil kellelgi vaja. Et aitäh!